I'll just repeat what I said. Basically, obviously this channel, this AMA has been in the making for a few weeks now, and we appreciate everyone, giving all their questions in the channel, and we're going to be trying to go through as many as possible today. And before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty questions, there's just a few overall project updates that we kind of want to cover, so everyone kind of has a bit more context before we dive deep. And I think the first question we kind of want to cover today was, what were the major changes that have happened recently in terms of the partner and the team? And I think that one is for you, Derek.
Yeah. I think someone just asked if we're recording as well. Okay, so as we go through, I'll aim to keep an eye on the chat, and I think we'll aim to try to answer some questions live and go through the long list of AMA questions as well. I wanted to just kick off by providing some updates, like some updates on what are the major changes that's happened recently on GOG and Immutable. So the first major change is that we have partnered with MindLoader, which are a kind of games development studio. They're based out of China, and wanted to kind of share some of the reasoning why, for those who might not be across it. So really, that there's kind of a few main reasons. The first is, and the big one is that we believe that in the long term, by partnering with MindLoader, we'll be able to deliver the game faster and to a higher quality. That's kind of the first change, and the second reason is because one of the things that Immutable and Guild of Guardians we want to do is we want to make the game as good as possible, right? And this requires us to be really, really good at everything. So really, really good at everything that you need in a game, even without blockchain, and then really, really good at everything that becomes complicated once you try adding blockchain into a game. Whether it's figuring out UX, figuring out economies, figuring out kind of communities, etc. And one of the things we've learned is it's really hard to be really good at everything. And so what we want to do strategically is work with a partner who's really, really good at all of the Web 2 stuff, and kind of that's everything they think about full time, and they're a true partner that helps us on that front. And we double down, and we're really good at all of the Web 3 things, and kind of combining that expertise. And so that's kind of the strategy behind this, and ultimately the strategy is to be able to deliver this overall gaming experience that's cohesively really strong, but doing it in a way that allows us to really focus the execution in different areas. In the interest of transparency, the consequence of this is also means that we've kind of parted ways with Stepico, who were the previous partner we're working with, as well as a number of colleagues who work in Immutable. And the reason I bring this up explicitly is because, I think we want to acknowledge the big contribution that they've made to the journey of GOG. We're very thankful for everything that they've done, and kind of appreciate the contribution to the game as well as the space. And so wanted to just share that with the community as well, so that we don't kind of forget that. So that's the first major update. The second update is more internal, right? And it might be a bit lost throughout the comms I had previously, which is that we've also, in order to execute on this strategy, we've also undergone a restructure internally. And so the Immutable Game Studio is now organized by function instead of by game. So previously it was very siloed, right? All the different games were kind of different, were doing their own thing. And now we're being organized by functions. So for example, like, design and marketing and so on, which allows the games to be able to share expertise, share tools, and share processes. So as an example, instead of everyone building their own wallet solution, it's actually a shared thing that gets used across different games. So instead of everyone trying to figure out their own staking methodology and staking tools, we can actually share some of this across the different games. So this is kind of the second, change, again, sharing in the interest of transparency, which is something that people are asking for, in terms of what's happening at Guild of Guardians and Immutable. The consequence of this also is that there's a change in my own role, right? And this is something that has actually been actually happened for a few months now, but we haven't been able to announce it publicly. So it's been a pretty long transition. But basically, in this kind of functional role, I'm going to be leading the economy function across Immutable, the games across Immutable. I'll continue to kind of be on the GOG leadership, like help be heavily involved in the community and direction of the game, but some of those is going to be split across the team as well now. So that's kind of a share something I wanted to share with the group here. It's also one of the reasons we have Clay here today as well, who we'll kind of talk shortly. Clay's going to be leading the design function. He's also been gradually onboarded to GOG over the last quite a while now, right? So this isn't his first appearance. I think we've mentioned it before, and he's very much looking at, for example, the core gameplay and design and working to make that as good as possible. And we have other people who are leading the different functions who I'm very keen to bring them on if they're willing to talk to the community because I think you'd like to meet them and hear them speak. So hopefully we can do that in the future as well to kind of give an overview of the different functions there. I think that's kind of the main high level update. I know there's lots and lots of questions. So for now, I'll probably just hand it over to Clay to do a brief intro of yourself for those who might not know you. And then we can kind of go through the different questions and Ryan, you can direct us since I know there's quite a few.
Yeah,
yeah, we definitely have some questions to get through.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of questions from the community. We appreciate it. Yeah, Claire, I don't think this is the first time you've been on the AMA, but I think for anyone who might not be familiar with you, maybe give yourself a bit of a short introduction, and then then you can get into. Derek mentioned how we can kind of launch faster. At least that was the plan with MindLoader. So maybe you can start explaining how switching development partners and our operating model is going to help the GOG launch a faster game this year.
Yeah, so for a quick introduction for myself, Chris Clay, everyone calls me Clay, VP and game director here at Immutable Studios, and I've been in the games business for quite a while. So if you want to go by time, 23 years, coming up on 24. Been in a lot of different roles across the industry. I've done pretty much everything from engineering to audio to art. So as a game director, a lot of my job is to go and find people who are better at every individual element than me and get them working on the project to go and excel in those areas. My biggest game by far was Magic the Gathering Arena. And in many ways, there are a lot of parallels between MTGA and, some of what's happening on Guild of Guardians as well. So I might use that as a reference point, as we dive in. When it comes to switching development partners and some of this restructure of the studio, I think a real key element here to talk about for those of you who don't know it is the sunk cost fallacy. Essentially, there's a fallacy that just because you've put a lot of time and effort into a single strategy or path, you should stick with it, because if you don't stick with it, all of that time is wasted, and that switching off is basically going to throw it all away. And that is definitely not the case. So even with this move from Stepico, even with this reorg, a lot of the work that went into the project to date is still incredibly useful. But the reason we made the switch is, in our assessment, this was going to let us get Guild of Guardians out the door faster and, at a higher level of quality. Some of how can it be faster if you're switching development partners, and some of this speaks to MindLoader's expertise in the squad RPG space, in that they've shipped games in this genre before. Some of it speaks to their ability to just work independently. So so far working with MindLoader, we've provided them with a complete map of what we believe we need feature wise and system wise to launch Guild of Guardians successfully. And they've kicked back great feedback on what they think we've potentially missed. And there's been a good partnership so far on that front. They're good. And some of that comes down to, we talked to a lot of different potential partners on this front. We absolutely evaluated Stepico. There were dozens of teams that we talked to looking at how we could work with them to move faster. And some of that moving faster comes down to, like, what does it take to launch a successful game? And launching a successful game is a balance of planning, it's luck, it's finding those happy accidents in the development process and turning them from accidents into meaningful systems, and iterative loops. And with MindLoader, we believe that iterative loops are going to be much faster than we've had before, particularly with them taking charge of the Web 2 development of the game, letting them lead more of the project internally with direct outcomes in mind means they can more rapidly prototype, playtest, iterate on those playtests to get to a really solid core loop. Obviously, we need to go execute on this now. A lot of this is in theory, but with my deep experience here, a lot of confidence in their ability to do this. And what this lets us do internally with the shift in the studio is it lets us spend more time working on that connection point between Web 2 and Web 3, and in the Web 3 metasystems that help support not just Guild of Guardians, but all of the games in the Immutable Studios suite. So we'll see, but pretty confident in the path that we've laid out so far.
Awesome, Clay. Thanks for that overall introduction. I think a lot of people, they might also want to know how the actual core gameplay loop is going to change as well. I think you kind of touched on that in terms of us focusing more on the Web 3 elements, while MindLoader is really focusing on the Web 2 development. Unless you don't want to add anything on that front.
No, happy to delve into that a little bit. So when it comes to the core gameplay loop, again, for people who have sort of delved into my past, I spent the first 15 years of my career at Turbine working on MMORPGs and a DC MOBA. And with MMORPGs, there was a constant grind for content, and it was not a balanced grind. We would work for a month to release an update to Lord of the Rings Online, and players would typically get through all of the content somewhere in between like 10 to 24 hours of gameplay. And if you do the math, that doesn't quite work to keep people engaged throughout the experience. So in joining GOG, some of what I was looking at is what is that balance of content and live updates that we would have for the game moving forward, beyond just adding more dungeons into the mix. And one of the places that I saw an opportunity with the style of game that we were creating was to add some roguelike elements into the mix. So it's not saying that we're going to completely abandon the idea of a story mode and dungeons, but MindLoader will be working on adding roguelike elements to one of the game modes. And I think this is important because adding an additional strategic layer into the moment-to-moment action, as you're navigating a dungeon, making choices at the key points along the way of, are you going to take the elite monster fight and potentially, take more damage to your guardians? Are you going to go take a safer path, fight some minor minions, get less rewards for doing so, but potentially delve deeper into the dungeon? Adding those roguelike elements let us skew that sort of content development effort to gameplay, reward and possibility space in our favor, allowing us to create more live content with more, challenges for players to go explore than if we're just creating, rote dungeons. So that's going to be a major change, obviously, to the original plan, but I think it's going to be really important to the sustainability of Guild of Guardians. And the other one is a bit of a bet. So I cannot prove this. This comes again from my intuition, from design, from the challenges that I've faced, in Gods Unchained with forging and fusing cards. But right now in the Web3 space, when it comes to interacting with Web3, I find the experience to be very clinical and the rewards to be difficult in nature, in that when objects in these games as NFTs have very real values, it can skew the balance of being able to give rewards out to players to a point where you have larger rewards at longer intervals, which isn't necessarily the most fun and rewarding as a player or as somebody looking to provide good content to players. So what I'm looking at working with MindLoader on is basically turning the interface from something that is more like a banking interface to something that is more graphical in nature. So allowing players to, merge resources together to then use in crafting, and giving us a smoother path from the Web 2 side of things into Web 3. So, how that might look is, if I use this simple example of like iron, like if going through a dungeon, you get iron nuggets, you turn 2 iron nuggets by, slotting them on top of each other into wrought iron, 2 wrought irons into a refined iron, 2 refined irons into a carbon steel, and basically upgrade those along the way. It allows us to fractionalize the road's rewards so we can potentially drop a whole bunch of nuggets as players encounter more difficult content. We can provide elements that are further along the chain and eventually get to that point where you're merging 2 things together and it takes it onto the blockchain. And then at that point, for more advanced crafting recipes, you can be playing the game and grinding. You can be selling things you don't need to go buy things you do need on the marketplace. And this is where we sort of get into that meta economy of things. And for anybody who has listened to me on podcasts and whatnot, I've talked a lot about economic interoperability between games. And this is where I'm probably the most excited, because the same system could be used to take NFTs from Gods Unchained, from Guild of Guardians, from Illuvium, from Shardbound, whatever project it is, could then create recipes in that meta system in the whole immutable ecosystem to provide further connection between the games, which I'm quite excited by. So, yeah, that sort of changes in summary.
Awesome, Clay. Thanks for that. And I think you left on a perfect note there in terms of economy. As you know, Derek is going to be leading a lot of our economy efforts now, Derek. So I guess this is a perfect time to ask you, how are we actually going to be updating our economy model to deliver on that sustainable Web3 economy that we're envisioning?
Yeah. So as the game evolves and as the industry evolves, I think we're constantly thinking about how to make the economy as good as possible. And in particular, there's a few focus areas that we want to look at, right? I think the first focus area is making sure that it's sustainable, and that there's specifically looking at like making sure that there are sufficient sinks in the economy. And I think part of what part of the systems that Clay's talking about, like for example, the idea of merging and having more ways to progress and merge, is one thing that we want to have, right? We want to have these, to be specific, for example, we want to have sinks for equipment, make sure there's sinks for legendary heroes as well. Some of these things that we haven't at least publicly been explicit on in terms of how those are going to happen. I think the second area is making sure that trading feels like a native part of the experience. So when you add trading to a game, it fundamentally breaks, the game, because players are no longer able to progress by themselves. Well, they shouldn't be able to, because otherwise, why do you even have trading? Like, in order to play through and progress, players actually need to engage and trade with others. That's part of the appeal of having an economy. And so how do you make that feel like a natural part of the experience? So I think part of it is making it so that players slowly get onboarded to that from a user experience perspective. Part of it's looking at, hey, how can we create, particularly for people who don't know anything about Web3, almost this magic moment where at the beginning of the game you log in and you discover ownership. And one of the things that I think of when I think of the magic moment for NFTs is actually not about just having something appear on your screen. It's actually selling something. So for being able to sell something for the first time. So how can we create these experiences for players? Do we do it artificially? Do we find other ways to do it, right? In order to make the experience as good as possible. The wallet experience also plays a big part. So kind of the move and adoption of IMX Passport, which was announced I think a month ago, is going to play a big role. And then the final area is looking at, I think, the numbers and iteration, right? So of the game economy. So just like how I think when you're when you're designing a game, you know, you don't know exactly if it's going to work on paper until you actually try it. I think the same applies for the economy. You know, we can make up all these theoretical numbers, but we don't quite know if it works or if it feels right from a player perspective until we try it. So I think that's going to be a very important part of the process, and figuring out ways to, you know, test economies is a novel problem as well, because in a test environment, people aren't as incentivized. You know, technically, it's a bit challenging to set up, but being able to do it is really important. So that's covered another area that we're looking at as well, and that'll also include like how can we involve as many people as possible to help us test, which obviously includes the yeah, and so excited to share more on this as we go as well. But these are the current like specifics that we're looking at.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're obviously working on something extremely complex in the Web3 game development space. So I think like building a sustainable economy and all the little intricate details that come with that. It's kind of something that every single project spends a lot of time to actually work out. And I'm sure as time goes on and we kind of work out those details, we'll share more things. So Clay, I also wanted to pop back onto you. In terms of the law at GOG, what are we doing there to kind of make GOG a leading franchise and IP?
Yeah, so something that we've been working on in the background now for, I don't know, probably a little over 6 months and change is the world building for Immutable Studios. I've been working with Petrichor and Ella on the creative side to bring more structure to how we world build both in Gods Unchained and Guild of Guardians. We've already started to breadcrumb out in the content for both little like secret hints about how all of that is going to work. And some of this goes with the switch to the new operating model. We need to make sure that we're creating, an equivalent of a dungeon master guide when it comes to creative, so that when we're working with, a partner like MindLoader, they know how to build, within the rules of the world, so that again they can operate more independently, but still, fit with the greater whole. It's an ongoing process, but the thing that I've found throughout my career is when you have it in place, you're able to ship much more holistic experiences. I think we've seen that on the Gods Unchained side of things with some of the more recent card set releases. There's a much tighter continuity to the whole experience, to the interactions between the characters, and that carries through to the gameplay itself. So yeah, it's it's setting those foundations so that we can bring that creative to not just the two games in flight, but potentially more down the line. And you're going to see that sort of roll out through some tentpole events and teasers in the not too distant future.
Awesome. Yeah, building an IP isn't something that happens overnight, and
no, it takes time.
definitely does. And I think to build up on top of that, what are some of the previews of our marketing and launch plans? I know this is a question that a lot of people are quite interested in.
Yeah, so when it comes to the marketing launch plans, we've already started pre-production work on our launch cinematic trailer. It is important on the hype side of things, to have those elements and events that get players excited about going exploring the world. This trailer will set the stage for Guild of Guardians and introduce the lore and characters behind the game, like players haven't seen before. And some of it is stemming from that additional creative work, in that it's going to allow us to tell a much more cohesive story, with the Guardians and the why for what everyone in the game is doing. We're working with a lot of different people, both internal and external, on an updated roadmap for Guild of Guardians that we're looking to release, trying to provide as much transparency as possible. We've also started working with marketing agency partners in preparation for our launch later this year, with a focus not only on global like brand campaigning, but also in localized marketing for our key markets, where mobile is more of a way of life. And some of this is going to the areas of the world where Web3 and Web2 and mobile collide, and focusing on those areas. And this is something that's emerging and may take us to places that people wouldn't necessarily traditionally think of for gaming, potentially into emerging markets like Africa, which again, for me, is a bit of a surprise to be talking about things like that, but I think it's got high potential. We've also made a key hire in a new growth lead that's slated to join in April that has a lot of experience with game launches and continuing to build the community up to that launch and beyond, which will they'll be very focused on the Guild of Guardians launch. And this is part of why we've made some of this operational change, in that in the new model we have more time to dedicate internal manpower to focusing on elements like this. And finding the right partners to assist us on it, versus some of even my day-to-day, just 6 months back, it's this challenge of being in the marketing, being in the Web3, being in the hiring, being in the Web2, helping to advance all of that together. In this new model, we've got a lot more specific focus.
Awesome. And on a personal standpoint, I love cinematic trailers, so I'm super glad to know that production for like a cinematic trailer is also in the making. So I'm very excited for that. And I think last question before we really dive into all the questions people have been asking us in the last few weeks. What are our plans for GDC and NFT NYC? I think everyone really likes to know what we're doing in IRL events.
Yeah, so gosh, on the in-person, still getting used to going back to in-person events. Mindloader will be joining Immutable at a panel that we are hosting at GDC. Immutable is a title sponsor for NFT NYC this year, and Guild of Guardians will be a part of many of the on-site activities planned at NFT NYC. And we'll have wall takeovers, posters, and other activations planned at the event and other side events, essentially around both. So there'll be definitely plenty of opportunities to engage in person at both GDC and NFT NYC.
Awesome. If you're in the area or very close, make sure you head down over there and show your love for GOG or Immutable. All right, I think we can finally, I think that's like a wrap for our high-level updates and everything, and we can finally get into the more specific questions. So we kind of took a lot of these in terms of what were the most popular questions that we've seen and what questions we thought the community would want to really know. And I think from the first question, so the Q4 2023 release, when we announced that, we didn't actually really specify, whether that's going to be like a full launch or an alpha or a beta. So Clay, can you kind of give us a bit more information and context on what that release actually entails?
Yeah, so this one I find mildly amusing, if you hear any humor in my voice, because I think over time, terms like alpha, beta, launch, otherwise have kind of lost their meanings. I'm going to use the label, early access, because I think that's the most common that you would sort of see on Steam. And some of that is what does early access mean? And to me, that means launching a fully polished and playable core experience for the game, and that you plan to continue development on that project and add additional systems and whatnot beyond the launch of the product. Like launch at this point often means the game is live and you're moving into live operations, but active development sort of slows to snail's pace. And when we launch in Q4 of this year, there will still be ongoing development to add additional systems in to, no small part, reach all of the promises that we've made over time. Some of that is having a laser focus on what is needed, to hit that, completely playable launch. And, to do that and reach it, it is making hard decisions along the way of like what will be in that launch and not falling into the eternal gaming trap of feature creep. It's a lot easier to continue to add additional things in than it is to launch. And my focus and the team's focus is going to be fully on reaching launch.
Awesome, thanks. I think Hornkex, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right whenever I read it. I think a follow-up question he had that I think is quite relevant is, will Q4 have blockchain integration? Derek, I don't know if you can touch on this, but
Yep.
do you have an idea?
Yeah. Good question. So, in our current roadmap, we will have blockchain integration by Q4. But I think the question is whether or not to what degree we open that up as well. Because one of the things that we want to be wary of is, as soon as we launch on mainnet with the real NFTs, you can't roll stuff back, right? And so I think part of whether that release actually is on mainnet or not, will depend on a lot of the testing that we do before then, and that gives us confidence that it's ready. So, I'll admit there's still a little bit up in the air in terms of the level of blockchain functionality, but at least internally, like we aim to have, that stuff done and so by then.
And I think the other element of that's a little bit tricky is it's where that integration fully takes place. Some of what we're in continual sort of discovery and modification on is what the app stores will allow us to integrate into the mobile app itself, what will have to happen sort of through immutable websites and otherwise, and that's something that we cannot completely determine on our own. I will say, for me, I would love to get it all in app. I also know that's not going to be possible to have everything that I would like to have in app by the end of the year, but ultimately, my goal with Web3 gaming is to get to that point where nobody cares that it's Web3. It just does everything that the players want it to do. I've often made the comparison to the cloud. Nobody talks about being in the cloud anymore because everyone's there and it just works as it's intended. And I think for Web3 gaming to truly take off, that's where we need to be. It just needs to work for players.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for that question, Conkex. I think a lot of people were definitely wondering about the blockchain integration. And I think speaking of, release dates and everything, people have been saying, how confident are we that MindLoader can actually both change the game and also deliver on Q4 2023? Because in the past, it was said that we wouldn't really announce any dates until we were confident.
Yeah, I tell you what, announcing dates is about the most nerve-wracking thing to do in game development. And it's often the thing that is the most incorrect because so many things can go right, so many things can go wrong, so many things can change along the way. Some of that, stems from confidence in MindLoader's experience in the genre, and having worked with them, through the sort of sussing out process and a couple of weeks initially here, there is a lot of confidence in their ability to deliver, to make hard calls, because in those conversations with the team, one of the traps you fall into in this sort of partnership is the partner just saying yes to everything. So some of what I suss out in looking for partners is, how do they tell me no? And MindLoader has absolutely told me no on a number of fronts, but it's a no but. It's like, no, we couldn't reach that on the timeline that we're looking for, but if we make these changes to the systems, make these adjustments, it's totally doable. And many times those adjustments don't have a meaningful negative impact on the experience. In some cases, it's just flat better, and it changes the timeline. And having some of that flexibility, I think, is going to help us, reach that goal. But a lot of it does just come down to MindLoader and their track record of getting things done at quality and on time.
I think one thing I'll add here as well is that so far in our experiences, and in my experience with MindLoader, they take a lot of ownership. Like, this is their game as well. as ours, right? And I think that's really good to see. Like they're not like taking a paycheck and kind of doing the minimum. Like they actually are proactive and taking the lead to make sure that this happens. And there's a lot on the line for them because this is a strategic an area that they're really keen to build expertise in, right? And if they can deliver on this, then it opens up so many options for them as well. So yeah, I think that additional context is also useful for building confidence in.
100%. Sorry, Derek, I just let you cut at the end there, but I think we caught the most of what you were saying there. So the next question is it true that GOG is running out of money? In a previous AMA, we were told that we had 3.5 years runway of budget, and I think kind of mix this question with another one as well. Is were you repeating what IMX was saying? So, for example, is IMX going to make sure GOG is successful, or are we actually on our own out here in the wastelands?
Yes. So GOG is not running out of money. We actually are spending more money in 2023 than 2022, and we've budgeted even more money in 2024 than 2023. And so the investment is actually increasing. Guild of Guardians is owned and published by Immutable. And so in many ways, we actually also share runway. And that's there's no separate budget, separate company, so to speak. It's part of the same company. And so that's why the runway of Immutable, which is, let's say 3.5 years or so, is also the runway of Guild of Guardians. And I think the other point I want to add here as well, in terms of the question of like why does Immutable want Guild of Guardians to be successful while we on our own? It's extremely important for Immutable that Guild of Guardians is successful. I think, and it's not just because of the standalone game, and making sure that the game is good and kind of makes money or whatever, but really what's on the line is the Web3 gaming space, right? This is a space that Immutable wants to win, and the success of Guild of Guardians actually sets an example to bring other games on board into Immutable. It helps build the playbook for how do we actually make trading fun? How do we actually create a good experience? How do we add economies into these games? So the strategic and tangential value of Guild of Guardians for Immutable is actually very high and beyond what an ordinary game would be. And that's part of the reason why it's received so much investment.
Yeah, 100%. At the end of the day, games like Guild of Guardians and GU, we're pretty much the bread and butter of what IMX is building in-house, and it's definitely obviously going to be a huge part in the long-term success of Immutable. So the next question is to you, Clay. So what actually attracted you to choose MindLoader? I know you kind of mentioned a few points so far. And what do they actually, quote unquote, promise in the proposal that made them stand out from the rest?
Yeah, and it's tricky here in that, there were a number of potential partners that I would still love to work with on products. Anytime you're going through this, there are hard decisions, to be made. And, with some of those potential partners, I'd absolutely love to work with them. But when it came to Guild of Guardians, MindLoader really stood out in that, some of this comes down to practicalities like team availability. They were able to ramp up really quickly on the project, which is something we absolutely needed if we were going to ship this year. Their experience in specifically this genre of game, and being able to play a product they've worked on and feel it gave me a lot of confidence in their ability to apply that same learnings to Guild of Guardians. Some of it is a repeat of what I said before, but like in that bidding process, being told no on certain systems, but this is what we could do instead, or like how we can plan out that roadmap of key features delivered to get the experience in-house into players' hands early, to build that overall confidence in where we're going. Some of that comes down to a lot of the discussions that we've had with all of the partners was around the beautiful corner. If people don't know what a beautiful corner of a game is, essentially a beautiful corner is a very tight experience for a product where you don't have depth of gameplay necessarily in terms of like days and weeks of gameplay, but over the course of a playtest, you can really see how that initial like couple of hours of gameplay is going to work, because what you need to get to truly have a successful game is you need to get to the end of internal playtests and have everyone want to keep playing. And with where Guild of Guardians was at, we weren't quite there yet. And my confidence in working with MindLoader on that beautiful corner to get to that point, once you're there, it gives you so much more confidence to build out all of the rest of the content, and it gives you that really solid foundation that you can keep going back to and seeing like if the changes you've made have added to it, or are they actually subtracting. If they're subtracting, making those cuts. And working through with the creative team at MindLoader, I had a lot of confidence that they were going to be able to get us to Beautiful Corner faster than just about everyone else. And that once they were there, they were going to be able to extend that through the rest of the experience to complete out the gameplay. As Derek had talked about, their ownership over it. It's really easy in the space to sort of just take things in and action on them. But MindLoader's creative team has done a really good job of taking things in, really asking great questions to truly understand what we're going for, and providing us back with solutions that absolutely solve the problems, absolutely reach the outcomes we want in a time frame that gets us to where we need to be by the end of the year.
Awesome, Clay. I think that gives us a lot more clarity on exactly all the variables that went into actually choosing what vendor to go onto. I think on a side note as well, do you guys remember how many vendors you guys actually considered before we made the decision? I know we threw out a number in the past, but that might also be worth noting here if you remember. But if not, we can keep going. But I do remember that.
I can't remember exactly, but ballpark it comes to mind as like 60 to 80, right? Like quite a very large number, and it was there were I think 4 to 5 steps in the process as we funneled down from a long list to a short list, and then making.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. I knew it was like a large number, and I think after all the steps and all the processes that Clay just mentioned, I think people can hopefully appreciate why it did take a bit of time for us to make sure and nail it down until we could come talk about it more publicly. But yeah, it was definitely a big process. So the next question is, how will esport in GOG be affected through a pay-to-win factor caused through different things, such as pets, energy tokens, the rarity of the Guardians guilds? And will there be a chance to compete with whales, even if you are free to play, but still a damn good player? And that question is for you, Clay.
Yeah, so I think my take comes from my experience working on Magic the Gathering Arena, in that every type of player brings different advantages to the table. Ultimately, you have to like pay to compete in vintage Magic, for example. Like it is very much pay to win, in that just to be able to participate, you have to have decks in some cases that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But just because you can't necessarily compete in vintage MTGA doesn't mean that there aren't places where you can use your time and skill to be very competitive. And I think when we look at Guild of Guardians, there will be a spread of experiences there as well, where in some cases, people who have mythic NFTs and beyond will have advantages. Absolutely, there's just no way around it. In order for those mythics to truly have value, they need to provide advantages. But that doesn't mean that those are the only ways that people can compete. We can create experiences, across that spectrum, so that, in some cases, it will matter that you've got the rare NFTs, and in others, it'll be skewed more towards player skill, or even specifically geared towards people who are more free to play, particularly in that on-ramping experience. It can be very important. Yeah, so long-winded way of saying, I don't think that everyone will be able to compete everywhere, just by the nature of things, but that we will provide places for everyone to compete.
Awesome, thanks for that, Clay. And I think just to also clarify something, I think you mentioned that mythics may have had advantage. So I think maybe you meant like legendary instead, like we have rare, epic, legendary, because I think mythic refers to the actual skin. Um, just to confirm on that end, or
Yeah, sorry, I was thinking of the progression of rarity within GU.
yeah,
That's my mistake. So yes, legendary.
yeah, no worries. I just want to confirm that.
Mythic Chef was like, I like where Clay's going with things.
Oh, yeah.
Scandal.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. There's obviously like being in Clay's shoes. I know there's like 100 million different variables that he's always working through. So yeah, definitely mythics aren't getting any advantages in game. Awesome. So I think the next question we want to do is so this was a question about marketing. From a marketing standpoint, what is planned for when we market the launch of the game? I think that question was from Mythic as well, funnily enough. But yeah, I think this one might be for you, Derek, or who really wants to take it.
No, what was the question?
Yeah, no worries. From a marketing standpoint, what is planned for when we market the launch of the game?
Yeah, I think we covered. I think we covered this before, but happy to go through it again if you want.
Yeah, no worries. I think we'll probably skip this because there's actually a lot of questions, and I don't really want to double down on questions that we already covered. I think to go into the next question. Will we get more development updates now with the new studio? I think this is a really big question that the community will definitely be interested in, Clay.
Yeah, I mean, I can say from my end, and throughout my career as a game director, I've always preferred being transparent and having a lot of ways to integrate, speak to the community, to inform them what we're working on, to be transparent about both the good and the bad. And sometimes that does mean we're sharing news that isn't the bestest of news. But getting into a more consistent cadence of information release is something that I know Veronica was mentioned earlier, is something that she is on my case all the time about, so that we can provide you guys with consistent updates on how things are going. So that is the plan. Exactly the form that will take is under discussion at the moment, but probably similar in some ways to how things are run over on GU, getting more of a heartbeat of updates on the overall process, rather than talking more at sort of like key moments along the way.
It's good to hear that Veronica is bugging you about that, because it's just like the community is like, when leaks, when updates. I think the marketing and community team also chases up the game dev team. Is like when leaks, when updates, so we can share that. So that's definitely good to hear. So the next question is, will the code ownership get transferred from Stepico to MindLoader? If it is, how is the transition currently going?
Yeah, so this is one of the hardest choices made during the process, and it was walking away from the previous code base to restart development with MindLoader. And this is some of that sunk cost fallacy. But in doing a deep dive, internally into the existing code base, and in discussions with MindLoader, it was decided that we would be able to move much faster working with an existing code base that MindLoader is already very, very familiar with in shipping similar squad-based games. So one of the biggest costs, if we had made that transfer, would be in getting that expertise into how everything works. Anyone who's a programmer knows the nightmare of working with legacy code and having to build that mental context for how the systems all integrate together. So why partly I'm so confident we can reach this is because MindLoader will be working with a game engine they are very familiar with, and essentially carrying over key pieces of Guild of Guardians from the art assets, sound assets, the designs, and otherwise. So essentially what that foundation, previously from the work that Stepico and otherwise had done is on the learning front. But it won't be in terms of code itself. It will be a Unity game. That is correct. Um, for context, this isn't the first time that I've had to make a call like this in my career. I talked about, Magic the Gathering Arena, and it was in a very similar situation there where I took over as game director of the project when it had been in development for, somewhere between 6 and 7 years, depending on who you asked. And yeah, essentially it was looking at where we were at and what we needed to do to get there, talking with the engineers and otherwise. And, we rebuilt the full front end and back end of the game in just a little bit over a year to ship. And, to do that, it was, essentially throwing away years of work, but it wasn't throwing away the learnings that got us to that point in time. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Awesome, and I don't know if you can touch on some of these questions, Clay. I think the community wants a bit of clarity on, will the game look completely different? In my understanding, that maybe they're referring to like the art and the design potentially, or I know obviously the core game loop might be quite different, but is there anything you can kind of touch on there at the moment, or is it something we need to probably comment more in the future?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we're actively working with MindLoader with and their creative team at the moment. MindLoader wants to make some upgrades to the art assets, to the rendering pipeline, and otherwise. I will be traveling to China to go visit MindLoader in person to sort of hone in some of this stuff in April, assuming everything goes to plan. So I do think there will be changes, but all of the Guardians will be fully recognizable, as they are to date, but potentially with an upgraded rendering path and, potentially a little bit higher fidelity in some cases.
Awesome, Clay. Appreciate you expanding on that. So I know a few people have been asking about a new version for the alpha test. So I think this is for the alpha test, but this relates to the playtest. So will there be any playtest build opportunities before Q4 2023?
I believe the answer to this is yes. Exactly when they will fall, I can't say. One of the key parts is hitting that beautiful corner. We're going to be playtesting that initially, in-house. And it is something that will likely require some goggles. When I talk about goggles, it's in a build like a beautiful corner, there may be pieces, of unfinished art. There may be placeholder VFX. There may be icons that are simple, text or otherwise. But the fun should be there. And when we hit that point, and in a game's development, it is a magical point where you're going and you're playtesting the game, and that hour is up, and you just want to keep going. Or you take it home and you play it overnight and you're standing around in the kitchen talking about the cool things that happened. When we hit that point, I think there is an opportunity for some limited play testability of that. This is a trade-off though, because as a whole, and that's the thing I'm going to be balancing against as we talk through with MindLoader. And it will be a balance of quality of any playtests versus the overall development timeline. Getting something stabilized and ready for external playtesting does take time, and that is time that won't be going into development. So when we echo back to the earlier transparency around what's happening with the community, this is something that I'm happy to continue to share about as we make progress internally on that beautiful corner. Leading up to that point where we can get some player hands-on of the game itself.
Awesome.
I know Veronica will be like, all of the playtests you can give me. So it's not just external pressure.
Yes, definitely isn't just external pressure. I can definitely vouch for that. And so I think overall message there is we don't exactly have a date. It really depends a lot on when we hit that sticky point of this game actually feels really fun. The loop feels solid, and then ideally we'd want to give early access. But obviously there's trade-off that come with that. But I think when the time does come, we'll discuss with the community and really see what the sentiment is and go from there. And Derek,
on that front, really quick, just to speaking to some things I've been throwing through chat, just with like Guardians and identification of them, particularly in game at game angle. silhouette is something that's incredibly important to like RPG identification of both monsters and guardians, heroes alike. And yeah, there may be scenarios where we want to make changes to NFT guardian silhouettes. If that was the case, it's something that I would look to take to the community just to get buy-in on a change like that. I don't want to make unilateral changes to the visual identity of guardians.
Yeah, that's awesome, Clay. I think a lot of people in the community, they've actually kind of grown and been attached to what silhouettes look like. So the fact that we actually go into the community and get buy-in before making any changes like that, I'm sure everyone would really appreciate that. Awesome. So I think, Derek, this next question is for you. All I'm going to say is when NFT staking?
Yes, yes. So just to recap, like I think last time we discussed that internally we're considering a few different options for giving back to early members of the community and specifically early holders of NFTs. So I'll provide an update on that. So currently we've decided internally to do NFT staking. So we've kind of putting and together a team to do that. We have evaluated a few different options, and I think similar to what Clay mentioned, what the community should expect is something that's going to be very lightweight and simple. And the main reason is we don't want to divert kind of engineering resources that could otherwise be focusing on the game and the blockchain dev and the wallet and integrations and so on. And the update is right now we have kind of high level solution that's kind of been signed off. We have a small working group that's going through the details, right? And some of the details are making sure that the incentives are designed well, making sure that we can get the right data, making sure it's legally compliant, because we always want to do that and kind of get by regulators. So there's still a few details to work out. I know that also some people have shared their own ideas, which we're looking at. I know like Tomahawk shared, for example, like a video that we looked at with different ideas. So ideas are definitely welcome, but keep in mind that we're aiming to do something very simple, which is and really is going to end up being run manually by us, just to set expectations of what to expect. So we'll provide updates as we can. No timeline right now. But also, given that there's no timeline, another thing we're looking at is being able to do part of the rewards as retrospect. So being able to, even if let's say it's not launched today, we can still identify who's held them for a long time, even before today, and make that part of the calculation.
Awesome. And if anyone didn't catch the last part, Derek mentioned that there'd be retrospective rewards. So we'll be identifying, how long you've been holding certain assets, and you'll be rewarded accordingly.
Yes, and Ryan is on the working group, so if you have like specific ideas or things, then you can bug Ryan, and I'm sure he'll make sure to funnel those to us.
Yeah, 100%. And before I get bombarded due to that, I also want to make clear that obviously there's some really cool features that people have actually reached out to us. I believe, big shout out to Tomahawk. I think he actually made a whole video presentation for us, and we really appreciate people giving their ideas and everything. But at the end of the day, there's obviously some limitations in what we can do in terms of constraints technologically and resources. I think we're quite transparent on that. But the main thing is that we 100% read all the ideas, and we definitely take them on board. So thanks. And Derek, to kind of keep the topic around staking, what would the team's plan be for active staking around after May 2023? Because as it currently stands, that is going to be ending there. So can you expand on that?
So currently we're looking at this. We're most likely we're going to continue it until the launch of the game. I think that the question is, one of the things we need to do is kind of like look at how it's performed so far to determine what the reward amounts are with. And so we have someone looking at that, and we'll aim to provide an update with that as soon as possible. So that's kind of the main one. I think a lot of people have also asked about whether we could automate some of this with kind of like a front-end UI. And I think this comes back to the same challenge of where do we allocate engineering resources. Currently, we haven't allocated engineering resources to create an automated thing for staking, since it's kind of working as it is, even though it's not ideal. And again, this allows us to kind of focus on other areas. We are looking at kind of easy things we can do here to make it simple. So we're still investigating this, but we don't have anything we could commit to right now.
Awesome. So I think that's the staking stuff covered for now. And now we're going to be going on to the esports engagement. So how many new players / mints did the esport engagement generate, Derek?
So the esport engagement ended up with around 4,000 purchases. In addition to this, we did like a buy one get one free giveaway effectively, and so you can expect the total supply to be less than 8,000. I think it's around like 6 to 7. We'll need to figure out the exact numbers. So overall, it's quite scarce. The sale didn't sell out, as everyone knows, right? So that is something that we kind of accept and deal with. I think it didn't have the amount of exposure that we expected, and there were a few reasons we kind of retroed on here that we can share with the community. The first is that obviously there's the market conditions, not only of Web3 but also which has fallen impacts for kind of the Web2 community. So we didn't see the level of conversion that we wanted there. I think the second kind of big retro point was it's very hard to predict supply and prices before a sale. Like typically projects do too little or too much. It's very hard to find a sweet spot. And so we definitely saw that happen. And I think the third thing is, probably for next time is we want to, we didn't test ideas directly with the community. We kind of definitely factored in different considerations, but it didn't talk directly enough. So that I think those are some of the key retro points. We are excited by the kind of start of this partnership though. And in the good news, it means that the heroes are going to be more scarce. And one of the things that you can expect from us and from the teams is to keep kind of trying and innovating. I think getting it right the first time is hard, and part of this partnership is very innovative. The way collaborative is quite innovative, and part of making the successful is going to be, experimenting, failing, learning throughout the multi-year partnership to ultimately be able to bring on as many people as possible to GOG and Web3 games.
Awesome, appreciate the answer, Derek. So I was also replying to some of the chats. So the next question is, when will you give the founder / OG NFTs value? That was just the question. Yep.
I think we covered that for NFT staking.
Yeah, that's fair. Awesome, we can probably move on from there. Sorry guys, I'm reading a lot of different messages at the same time.
And just to answer some questions in the chat, so the partnership with the esports teams is a multi-year partnership. And so yes, they're gonna keep promoting GOG. We're kicking off discussions with them right now to kind of plan out the next year, right? And so that's happening right now as well.
Yeah, I think with the esports partnership, a lot of it would also make sense depending on when we do certain campaigns or initiatives, and we'll have to do it strategically as well to make sure that we're activating them at the right times. Awesome. Let's see. Next question we have is, I expect there will be more upcoming sales, and the esports sale will not be the last one. In relation to that, what are the plans of the GOG team to avoid the devaluation of the Founder Series NFTs?
Yeah, so I've seen this question a few times. So we currently don't have any sales planned. We don't plan. And we don't plan to have any sales until after the game is launched. We do plan to have sales in the future though, after the game is live. This is obviously part of the business model that ensures that we can continue to update the game and deliver a really good experience for as many people as possible. I think the approach for us for how to find the right balance between allowing people to get access to these assets, to new assets, and to balance that with devaluing old assets is really in finding that balance. And I think there's a few things that we think about, right? We want to balance the scarcity. We want to make sure that there are enough assets that exist that allows us to onboard as many people as possible. And where we want to have millions of people playing, and if we reach that point, there'll need to be millions and millions of assets. The second one which is really important, is we want to make sure that we're balancing for sustainability. So, introducing infinite NFTs is not sustainable. And so pacing the introduction of NFTs, whether it's sold or not, right, I think is really important. And the third thing is that we want to help provide certainty to the community where we can. And this is an interesting one because NFTs, I don't know whether we can promote this, but they can be traded for value. So people will take information and kind of make financial decisions, right, based on everything. And so we want to help provide as much certainty as possible for people to make decisions. And that certainty might be, hey, we're not planning to do any mints until after the game's live. That certainty could be no info as well, right? Like we don't have any info to share with this, or it could be like here is like a general rule that we have for the next few months. But the goal is to try to provide that like public certainty as well so that everyone's on the same playing field, and people can make decisions accordingly. So I hope that answers whether we're doing sales and how we think about introducing new NFTs in the future.
Yeah, I think that definitely gives a lot of clarity. Thanks for that, Derek. And so the next question is, how do you intend to be proactive about bot accounts, multi-accounts, brackets, VPNs, and virtual machines, and folks with 100 iPhones? This is a huge concern, especially with autoplay functions. I think maybe Clay, if you can touch on this one.
I can talk to this one. That's been one of the biggest learnings working on Gods Unchained is even when you create systems that you believe you favor real players over bots, bots can really surprise you. We've had a lot of challenges with bots, over time, in Gods Unchained, and in the blockchain space in particular, there are actually a lot of incentives to not fight against bots, I think, as a game developer, because I know there are plenty of games out there that are incredibly bot heavy that look better on paper because numbers wise, their player counts are really, really high. So do you fight the bots and provide transparency to the reality of how many people are playing your games to protect your actual players, or do you let things run wild and sort of go with the hype? I think particularly in this bear market, if you went with the hype, your product may be hurting more than if you hadn't. But there is some question there. On my side of things, working with the team, we've put a lot of work into our systems to be able to identify bots in the game, into being able to run systems over all of our data to identify accounts that may likely be botting, and then ultimately to ban them. And I think we're going to be fighting a similar battle on the GOG front. I think we've already got a lot of tools there, talking to some potential partners that are using AI to do a similar look over all of the data to better identify bot accounts. And it is fighting them on multiple fronts. It's fighting them at registration, making it difficult for them to mass register. It's fighting them by looking over the data of gameplay and seeing how they're interacting to identify bots and take them out of the ecosystem. And it's also in the game design and the economy itself, in that when things are in purely the Web 2 space, I think it's all okay for a time for bot accounts to be able to live there. But as you make that transition of assets from Web 2 to Web 3, having parts of the economy in place that make that more difficult for bot accounts or provide a cost to things, so that when they are banned, it's costing them real-time effort and money because they have to pay, for the servers, the boxes, electricity, and otherwise to basically run those things. So it is an ever-escalating challenge. It is an ever-escalating battle. In some ways, AI is helping us fight it more easily. In some way, AI is making it easier for bot accounts to dodge. I don't expect this, escalating war to stop anytime soon. All I can say is we've got some tools and systems in place to fight it, and we will continue to invest in doing so.
Can I add a really quick comment on bots as well, Ryan? I know we're short on.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, cool. So I think one thing that we want to do is we want to solve it at definitely at like a economy design level. So when you think of bots, the ones that people are worried about, they're really businesses. So they have a cost of running and creating the bot, they have a cost of buying NFTs potentially, and they're trying to generate a profit. And so the way to get rid of them through incentives is to make it so that their business is unprofitable. And that's kind of some of the thinking that goes into the design. We assume there's going to be bots. I think that's part of assumption, and we kind of keep that in mind when we're thinking through some of the designs.
Awesome. Thanks for that additional input, Derek. So the next question relates to PvP. Can we expect some kind of PvP elements, or are we still strongly against anything PvP related? And of course, that is for you, Clay.
Yeah, I think I need a better definition of what people think when they hear PvP to truly answer this. And maybe people can drop stuff in chat. But in terms of systems that allow for players to compete, absolutely. In terms of PvP of real-time PvP action, probably less likely until later on down the line. But asynchronous PvP, I think, is something that we will see in Guild of Guardians, actually, well, almost certainly with time. But synchronous PvP is a whole different ballgame.
Awesome, thanks for that. And I think this kind of builds on top of that is like a multiplayer. Is there any sort of like synchronous multiplayer we could be expecting, or is that something more in scope for the future?
Yeah, like synchronous, synchronous PvP gameplay, not in the current plan for 2023. It isn't necessarily friendly to mobile in general, in that, I guess another thing to think about, philosophically, to make a mobile game's success, there are multiple paths to engagement that you can go down. And one of them is that very intense, like MOBA-esque, like for the next, half hour, 15 minutes, whatever the play cycle is, I'm going to be super focused on my phone. And the other part is where I see more of the industry going, where I'm able to engage on my phone and make progress while I'm multitasking with other things, be it in a meeting, watching TV, where the game demands my focus, but not unlimited focus. And I think PvP leans towards that. And I think with Guild of Guardians, it's like where I'm looking at taking the game is more of that mix, where I can play the game while I'm watching a movie, while I'm watching a TV show, while I'm on the train, potentially in a meeting, where it's not all consuming and it's easier to pause. Again, PvP synchronous gameplay can't be paused. So that's some of my thoughts there. I can understand why people want it, but not my focus at the moment.
Awesome, thanks for that, Clay. I think it's really important to have that sort of authenticity and transparency with the community. And obviously, when there's so many questions that we always get asked, not every answer we have is going to be ideal for every single person listening to it. But I think people can hopefully appreciate the fact that we're honest and upfront with what our vision is at the moment. And I think we've got about 10 minutes left here. I think we went through quite a lot of information today. Just a reminder, Turn-In is recording this session, so we'll have a recording of this session for everyone to listen to after this is over. If anyone has like last minute questions, feel free to pop it into the GOG stage chat. And we'll try and get through as many as possible. But yeah, I think overall, in the future, we're obviously going to be having big dev diaries, updates, and also, AMAs just like this.
We lost you there, Ryan.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just reading some of the chats here. This is a big message. So this is from Tomahawk. Spending money on marketing and manpower is great to promote game launch. What are you doing in regards to organic growth for the community? In other words, what are you expecting the community to do between now and the game launch? Yeah, that's a great question, Tomahawk. So 100%, I think, like we always echo, that community is at the forefront of a lot what we do, and due to recent changes, at Immutable, it's been a very interesting period in where community fits on that and I think right now we're still working out internally what the objective is in terms of how much organic growth we want externally and internally, and I think the main thing here is how can we actually empower people within the community to kind of actually help spread the message of GOG and build things. So this might come in the form of things like community grants and ambassador programs that are actually led through the community as well. We definitely have to dive a lot deeper into that for sure. Guild token owners are some of the most valuable community members that have extensive funds. Who have ongoing with the growth. Yeah, so this is something that I definitely spoke to Josiah about in the past in terms of how can we actually involve guild leaders in these discussions. And I think due to the recent, for transparency, I think due to the recent changes in terms of where GOG is going, we're probably going to have to revisit that and see how we can actually integrate more of the community feedback and direction into what we actually want. Yeah, I think right now I definitely don't have the full answer to that, honestly, but 100% it's something that we understand and prioritize.
I think one thing, I think there's some questions about like growth and things like that. I think like strategically in general, we will probably want to focus a bulk of the visible efforts for growth when the game launches. Because it makes the most sense to bring people in when there's something playable. That doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything. There's a lot of preparation work required to actually make a global launch successful, right? Like things like even things like, hey, how do we reach different markets and different languages? How do we kind of prepare for that big moment? And then in addition to that, I think it's being able to, we've actually grown the community quite a bit in the past 6 months, but a lot of them aren't active in the Discord right now. So I think part of it's like, how do we actually just better engage and serve the existing community that exists as well as another kind of strategic focus. So hopefully that gives you kind of some idea of the direction that the team is looking at. We're always welcome to ideas. I think in having forums where people can share those more easily is definitely.
Yeah, 100%. I think Derek hit the nail on the head when it said, in terms of growth is always good in principle, but without a game, and especially in these conditions, it can be kind of difficult to retain people. So I think like a product like GOG, when we actually are a game, it definitely helps a lot on that end. But 100%, that doesn't mean we're not going to do anything. And I think a big part of what we can do for the current community is what can we do to actually empower, individuals in our community, like yourself, Tom, of course, to help automate a lot of these, events to keep people entertained and updates. And I think from our end is, I know Clay touched on it earlier, is how can the team, provide more transparency to the community, whether that's in the form of AMAs, game development updates, leaks, and yeah, it's definitely something that we're open to hearing ideas from. But I think the answer will definitely rely on how do we scale the current community together while we incentivize everyone.
And I think there's opportunities there to potentially pull over from like Gods Unchained. Some of the things are working, particularly on that sort of like super engaged community member front, with like Council of Mortals on GU, bringing some of those learnings over to the Guild of Guardians community as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think GU, like you mentioned, has Council of Mortals, and there's definitely a lot of learnings that we can pull from there. This kind of goes back to the philosophy of, it's not just GOG as it's like a standalone game. Like Immutable obviously can draw a lot of learnings and success from GOG, just like how we can draw a lot of learnings from GU. I think with councils, it's an interesting format because obviously the community always has a lot of inputs and thoughts on things, just like how we do now in the AMA. But what is possible and feasible for the for the team, whether it's for like NFT staking or a certain game decision, it's a very complex area, to be honest. But I think there definitely is a middle ground where we can kind of collaborate together with the community in a way that, as long as all parties understand that not everything that people want will always be possible, as long as everyone's actually heard and there's like genuine discussion that happens, it's definitely something that we can explore. I think Cornex had an interesting question before. He said, "Can you at the end tell us something more about the roguelike ideas that you touched on earlier, Clay?" I think a lot of people really enjoyed hearing you speak about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would lean into there is games can be great in so many different ways. They can be great, PvP, MOBA style games. There can be great, solo, RPG games. There can be games that are, hybrids of all of them in between. And some of it is, trying to get transparency here of like what my focus is in directing Guild of Guardians. And right now that is squad gameplay. That is, specifically because building a squad provides a lot more opportunity for the NFTs that we have minted to have higher value. It provides more opportunity for players to build and expand their teams. It provides more opportunity for synergies within those teams. And it is a very different game from a solo PvP game. And a lot of this comes down to like, how do you get confidence in timelines? So, I could be here and be like, yeah, great, we're going to do, synchronous PvP before we launch. And then we're looking at a launch, in like 2025 or 2026. And, right now it is that laser focus on getting us through to launch, and then building those additional systems over time. And, with over time, depending on how, things go, so many different, paths, could evolve from there. But like with this roguelike, a lot of it does come down to, how that gameplay evolves as we iterate on it with MindLoader. And, some of it is about possibility space. So when I talk about game design and possibility space, it's the sum of all of the options that you as the player have to explore. And when you look at roguelike gameplay, some of the reason it's so successful is it has the possibility with relatively simple mutations, like adding a cursed artifact in for a live event. Like you've got to take this cursed artifact with your guardians through a dungeon and defeat a boss. And that cursed artifact makes things way more difficult. And by adding that one element into the gameplay with a roguelike on that run, you've completely changed the experience. Certain, like elements, within that run that didn't necessarily matter, may not have been viable options, could be viable options now. Approaches and like compositions of guardians that used to be the norm may not work in this. So it gives time for the players in the community to evolve the meta. Like, what is the right way to go and solve this? And a lot of what was great about roguelikes, it is that ability through relatively simple mutations to give players new fun challenges to explore, and then unique rewards out of that. Exactly how it's going to play out, I couldn't tell you today because we're still in active design and development on it. But it will be looking at all of it through that lens of how does this change improve the overall possibility space of the game and give players options to go explore. And I think, this harkens back a little bit to people were talking about like options on the Guardians, like qualities of the Guardians themselves. Does, provide us with the opportunity to potentially add new elements into that matrix as well that would interact with this gameplay. Definitely something I'll look at bringing more information to in the future. I think, in April is probably when I'll have a better handle on some specifics that I could share. Obviously, not everything, but yeah, happy to continue to explore that with the community.
Thanks for that answer, Clay. I hope that gives you a bit more of an inside context on how that looks like. I think that that pretty much wraps it up for today. We had a really long AMA, 1.5 hours, and we all are reading as much of the chat as we could, as well as the questions that people asked us beforehand. I think so monthly AMA update would be nice. Yeah, I think for sure we will definitely want more frequent type of town hall type of events to kind of obviously just talk to the community in this authentic manner. I think Derek mentioned earlier that there's a lot of people behind the scenes that I think would be great for the community to get introduced to, and we'll definitely be doing that in future iterations. And monthly development updates. I think we kind of touched on that earlier in this AMA. It's definitely something that Clay is being pushed on, and we'll do our best to work with MindLoader to see what the appropriate structure would be for us to kind of get the best of both worlds, where we don't obstruct their development process too much, and at the same time, we get a steady, nice flow of updates for the community to share. And thanks everyone. I think that it's a big new chapter for GOG. It's been a wild ride. I think a lot of people here in the chat, especially, they've been through it all, and I think in Web3, let alone in game development, I don't think it's ever an easy journey. But I'm very sure and very confident after today's AMA that this is a new chapter for all of us, and we're super excited to do this together with the community. Any last thoughts or closing remarks, Derek and Clay?
Thanks so much to everyone who's here. Appreciate sitting through 1.5 hours of us talking about stuff. So yeah, very, very excited to share the journey with everyone. Very, very excited.
Yeah, and really excited to get this opportunity to work on Guild of Guardians, getting back into my RPG roots, and getting to explore exactly how we integrate Guild of Guardians with Web3 is something that's really exciting to me. Getting the opportunity to work with everyone on the team and to work with MindLoader is something I'm really looking forward to. It's definitely been a highlight of the last couple of months for me, and look forward to sharing more with you all in the near future.
Fantastic. And just a reminder, Tonin is recording this whole session, so I'll edit the link into the announcements after this, so everyone can go back and listen to Derek and Clay speak about GOG for another few hours again. But yeah, other than that, we'll definitely do this again sometime soon. And take care, everyone.
Thanks all. See you later.
Cheers.